All right, what's up, everyone? It's Coach Rob Deboer, and I am behind the camera, obviously, and I'm here with one of my dear friends, Becky Wollenberg, and Coach Kyle Radaker, who, up until recently, was a big skeptic with what we do, but I think it's a story that needs to be told because it validates what I believe, the concepts, and it's connected me to some really smart people, Kyle being one of them. So, Becky, we're going to start with you, and this will go viral because so many people want to understand how to better use ketones as a performance athlete. And I know, Kyle, you talk about metabolic performance, but now we're going beyond that to metabolic optimization, so we'll touch on that. So, Becky, I call you up ballpark 4 years ago and say, hey, I want you to try something. At the time, you're just starting training, just getting into endurance sports. I'll let you kind of take it from there.
Correct. So, yes, I would call myself at the time a recreational triathlete. I just knew enough to be dangerous. I'd barely gotten wet in the water, and I got a call from you, Rob, and I took the supplement because I trust you. I consider you a mentor and a friend, and you have a pretty good track record in health and wellness. And I started taking the product. I did nothing differently as far as my nutrition went, but I took the product because I got it from a trusted friend.
Right, didn't know what to expect. It wasn't, hey, all of a sudden start eating a bunch of fat, low carb. We were more geared towards that back then, but then I got a call from Wendy, your partner, who's awesome, and said, hey, we're gonna go do some metabolic testing with her coach. Can you be on standby in case he's got questions? Enter in Kyle, and this is maybe probably 2 years ago, year and a half ago. And why don't you first of all start with what you do, kind of your background, because we're going to come back to you, Beck, and kind of update where you are now. You're not just an average beginning, know enough to be dangerous. You're actually very successful at what you do. But Kyle, kind of take it from there with your metabolic cart, your background, and then what you saw the first time with Becky.
Sure, I was a trainer many years ago. I think I've been in the industry now for 25 years when I first got certified, and went back to college after a couple of years personal training because I realized I really didn't know enough to be effective, or at least as how I was at a level of effectiveness that I was after. So I went back to school, graduated from Duke. Went back, got my undergraduate degree then at UNC Greensboro, and my degree is in Exercise and Sports Science with a focus in Exercise and Sports Psychology, applied, which is what we were talking about this afternoon. And so when I got out of college, I started training again, and there was a guy that I met that had a metabolic cart at one of the YMCAs, and I was fascinated by this technology that you could actually measure somebody's oxygen uptake and then pick off thresholds, so aerobic and anaerobic thresholds, to simplify that just when your body is in a mode of burning fat for primary energy, and then when you go above anaerobic threshold and you're starting to rely on glycogen more. It also measures resting metabolic rate. So resting metabolic rate, very simply, is how many calories does your body burn or need per day for basal metabolic functioning, which is brain, heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, red blood cell reproduction, immune system, gallbladder, pituitary gland, and lean mass. What you always say, if you think, it makes you blink, it makes your heart beat, makes your lungs work, all of these things. So I've been doing that now on the cart that I have for 12 or 13 years. And in that journey, during that process, I've come across many coaches and triathletes and runners, and as well as people who are 70 years old and just want to feel better, children maybe, kids that have some sort of eating issues that they want to figure out. It really runs the gamut. So Becky and Wendy came and got tested, and when I first put Becky on the metabolic cart and did her resting metabolic rate to determine her basal or baseline metabolic needs, caloric needs, she scored very low on what we call RQ, or respiratory quotient, which is quite simply a comparison of how much oxygen you're breathing in and how much carbon dioxide you're breathing out. Basic respiration says for a certain amount of oxygen in, you should breathe out a certain amount of carbon dioxide, but it varies depending on whether you're burning energy from fat or whether you're burning energy from carbohydrate. And Becky scored very low. on that. So I thought, wow, I wonder what this chick is up to. I wonder what her diet looks like. So I asked her, I said, just out of curiosity, what do you eat? What does your normal food intake look like? And she kind of laughed a little bit and said, well, you know, I do a little bit lean in towards more fats, a little fewer on the carbohydrates, solid with the proteins, but I have a friend of mine who helps me out, and I take a supplement called exogenous ketones, at which point I think she probably saw the whites of my eyes, because I was like, oh my God.
Here we go.
Here we go. So I said, okay, that's cool, no problem. And she said, but we're pretty good with that. We're straight with that. So, you know, that's great. And I said, wonderful, because I didn't want to get involved, really. I really didn't know what it meant, to be honest with you. I made an assumption that I later found out was incorrect. I thought exogenous ketones in the supplement she was taking meant, the claim was that it would put her into ketogenesis. And so I later found out that's not the case. So anyway, we finished with the basal metabolic rate, and then I did her VO2 max. Simple to understand, a graded exercise test. Every minute to 2 minutes, you take the level of intensity up. If it's on a treadmill, you raise the incline and then move into a jog and then to a run. If you're on a bike, you're simply adding watts every minute to 2 minutes. Pedal speed staying the same so that you can get this graded intensity level. And so we went all the way through the test with you, and the harder that I pushed her, I kept noticing that her body was not wanting to transition over into carbohydrate for fuel. She was staying in a fat burn till I got her all the way out towards the end of the test to her true VO2. She didn't go into what we call crossover, which is when your RQ, that respiratory exchange ratio, goes above a 1.0, meaning you are now completely dependent on carbohydrate. She never crossed that line. So again, I thought, what's up? Like, she came in with the same, you know, what she's telling us right now, like, recreational, enough to be dangerous. And I'm like, I don't know. She had a big VO2 number, which means she's sitting on a big engine, and she burned rich, which means she should be able to hold a strong output without bonking or fatiguing because she wasn't using up her glycogen.
In other words, as athletes, and we'll speak specifically to that, we have two fuel sources. We have sugar and or carbs stored as glycogen.
Right.
And then we have fat, which can convert into a fuel source called ketones.
Correct.
Becky was drinking ketones, not necessarily making her own. Now, while she very possibly could, that wasn't her focus at the time. Her focus was, I just want to train, I'm drinking this product, and what you're seeing is her body, for whatever reason, became a good or an efficient or even preferable fat burner when she was put under pressure, when you put her through the test.
Right. And that's uncommon to see anyway, because most people that are endurance athletes are trying to fuel their body with a higher level of carbohydrate under the precipice that if I put carbohydrate fuel into my body and I really fill up those glycogen stores, then I'm going to be able to perform at a higher output longer. So what they're really doing is they're sustaining a higher output from dietary intake, but it's constant. It's constant. It's not being created endogenously at some point.
Got it. So, Becky, you went on and started experimenting. I don't even know. I think you and I, we didn't lose touch. I couldn't train you because I wasn't your coach. I didn't understand your sport well enough. So did you go on and start experimenting more? One thing that was constant was ketone supplementation. What, once or maybe twice a day?
Usually once a day at that point.
Was it pre-training? Was it specifically around training? Was it every day for breakfast?
It was usually pre-train.
Okay.
Because that's when I felt like it was the most important to utilize it, and I felt the best using it. So
in other words, she was putting two energy source or an additional energy source into her body. So maybe for the first time ever, if we say this correctly, her body was a dual fuel athlete where ketones were coexisting in the body with glucose at the same time for perhaps the first time ever.
Right, and I think what's really notable with that too is a lot of times when a triathlete or an endurance athlete goes out for pre-training, they're preloading with carbohydrate. And so she was preloading, and still does, with the exogenous ketones. So dual fueled would be a great way
Awesome, awesome. So take me from there. Okay, so now we've got this perfecting your craft, if you will. You're becoming a more competitive triathlete. I mean, you've only been doing this 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah, 2 years the right way.
I mean, you're a trainer, former college basketball player. You're an athlete.
Sure.
Beyond just an everyday average person, but you were a beginner still at this point. So take me from there. You meet with Kyle. You start kind of making some dietary changes on your own.
Correct.
I don't know if it's trial and error. Do I go high fat, low carb? Give us some of your best practices. Like if someone's watching and says, hey, I want to begin this journey. I want to explore how this might work for me. Take me from where you were just drinking these, then to begin implementing nutritional support.
Okay, so the other interesting thing about this story is that I food journal on a daily basis religiously. So for the last 3 years, I know exactly what I put in my body 95% of the time. And what I was finding was I was just tripping over myself. I didn't really know where I was going with it, but I knew that we were onto something because I knew I felt better when I took this ketone supplement and started implementing more high fat, healthy fats into my diet. So I went from having some carbs, like a banana protein shake with ketones before I worked out, to I just cut out the protein in the banana and all that and just did ketones and some sort of healthy fat, a partial stick of butter,
avocado,
avocados, a handful of nuts, and I felt even better. So that's when I really started dialing into my macronutrients, and I went from eating like a normal triathlete would, 60% carbohydrate, to dropping that carbohydrate number to about 20%, and then going about 60% fat, 20% protein. So that's a doable thing for anyone. And if you'll just allow your mind to go there, and that's really what I needed to do, was to allow my mind to go there and know that I didn't need those carbohydrates. And when you and I would talk, and you would say, look, carbs are, they're an inferior fuel source. Ketones and fat is the best place to get your fuel. So I experimented with that to the point where that's where I was dialed in. I felt great at that 60-20-20 split. And
awesome.
That's pretty much where I am today. I mean, I do more, I'd say it's more like a 65, 15 carbs, 20 fat, or 20 protein. But I've never felt better. I think I'm fueled well. And the fat and ketone adapted.
Well, I'm going to ask you some specifics, but I want to go back to you, Kyle, because you touched on it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important for people to understand and differentiate the difference between ketosis, osis, a condition or state, versus ketogenesis, a process where we actually are generating ketones. Because that's where you and I connected, and then the crossover happened for you to say, wow, there's merit, I'm open-minded, there's a lot of misinformation on Google, there's a lot of misinformation being marketed to people. Right. This isn't a fat-burning product. Right. It's a ketone fuel source, big difference. So tell us where you all of a sudden became a believer. Was it the fact that you now were differentiating, okay, I see what this is really doing, and then take us from there?
Yeah, I mean, so again, we were kind of chuckling earlier, and when I mentioned going back to school and doing applied exercise and sports psychology, there's an article that was one of the first articles that we had to read when I began that program, and it's From Smocks to Jocks. And really what you're talking about is there's a number of things that can happen in the lab, but until you take it out onto the field and apply it out in the setting in which it will occur, you really don't know the whole story. So while I am one of these people that I want to make sure I know things and that I'm leading people through coaching in the right direction, a seed got planted when Becky and I met and talked, and I thought, I hate the fact that I think that maybe one of my athletes knows more than me about something, so I better go and look into this. And so I just started to slow drip information to myself, try to learn a little bit more. I was monitoring and learning a lot from Becky going through the process. And so that just made me open up. I thought, I got to pay attention. I cannot just turn a blind eye to this. And so that's really how that started.
Got it. So then you saw the application. You said, I'm going to experiment myself. I'm going to start utilizing these, not just with myself. I know Becky's been doing this, but I'm going to share this with a few of my clients because you're a high-level coach. You coach not just weekend warriors. You coach high-performance athletes that compete at a high level. Give us kind of your experience, what you saw, because I think it's important to come back to, you don't say it, it's not true because you say it because it's true. In other words, your metabolic cart is where the rubber meets the road. You can prove it, you can see it, you can substantiate it, black and white.
That's exactly right. So same thing we were talking about with the basal metabolic rate or the resting metabolic rate. The other reading that I get is respiratory quotient or respiratory exchange ratio. Very simple. 0.7 means somebody's burning fat extremely well. 1.0 or higher means they've gone now completely into glycogen burn. And so once I graduated from working with Becky on this and had met with you and tried it, I asked several of my clients and friends to go down the rabbit hole with me, to take the journey. Let's see what happens if we take these ketones, make some minor modifications, and then I test them and see what happens. And sure enough, everybody that I was testing, well, because I was sending you updates about every 3 or 4 days, I just tested another one and their RQ level has come down. Pretty much everybody that I tested went below a 0.8. I wouldn't say everybody, but I'd say 7 out of 10 went below 0.8, which means they really went into a rich burn or utilizing fat as their primary fuel.
And the only differentiator was drinking ketones, or were they beginning to eat more of a ketogenic derived diet?
Yeah, we cleaned up their diet quite a bit, but I would say pulled out the refined carbohydrates as much and then included the exogenous ketones.
And so unmistakably, black and white on paper, by and large, you're saying maybe not every time, but for the most part, people became fat adapted more efficiently, more effectively by simply adding in this additional fuel source.
Correct. And I think that what's really important is to say is once we started to cycle back out of necessarily clean eating or a higher or more focused on fat dietary intake, as we came back up and started food cycling or dietary periodization, bringing more carbohydrates back into the diet to be race ready or to be available so that when training adaptations were going more into an anaerobic effort, that people would be fueled for that, dual fueled, RQ factor still down.
Awesome. So now let's go into this last segment and talk about present day. A lot of people want to know, what have you learned over the last 2 years of doing this? We know, and I kind of came across this, we've got 4 fuel sources that are available. 2 internal, 2 external. In other words, we've got stored fat that can convert to energy, ketone energy. We've got stored carbs that can convert to energy, glycogen, liver and muscle glycogen. Then we've got external sources, both exogenous ketones, a caloric value. That's where most people in the fitness industry miss it. Ketones have a caloric value. They act as a macronutrient. So we can supplement those in externally, as well as glucose. Again, a caloric value. So we've got 2 internal fuel sources, 2 external fuel sources, and I think, you would now say you're a better performer using all 4. In other words, you're always going to use what your body's got available. You're going to use fat stores. You're going to use muscle and liver glycogen. But now you've come to the conclusion, Rob, I'm not just supplementing ketones, I am supplementing glucose. What does that look like? So, and let's talk about maybe race day, pre-meal, during, post, that type of stuff.
So you kind of just answered the question for me, but the beauty of this product is that I don't have to eat a ketogenic diet. I don't have to do something that for me isn't sustainable. Race day fuel and pre-race, so 3 to 4 days out, I might up my carbohydrate intake, knowing that when I get to race day, I'm gonna have to,
You're needing
reach
them.
into those glycogen stores. So, I might go a little bit higher carb a few days before my race, but day of race.
And what would those carbs be though? Is it bread? Is it oats? Is it
Healthy carbs, potatoes, a little bit of pasta, sweet potatoes, that sort of thing.
Yep.
So I'll just up that just a little bit. I mean, maybe 50 to 100 more grams per day.
Okay.
3 to 4 days out. And then I just stick with what I'm doing. I go from that 65, 15, 20 split to a 55, 25, 20 split, 25 carbs.
So you're maybe pulling out a little bit of fat, adding in a little bit of carb, protein pretty much constant.
Pretty much stays, pretty constant.
Awesome. So give me, you wake up the morning of your
Yep.
race. What are you putting in your body?
About 100 or about 1,000 calories before
Be
I
specific.
even start. And that's going to consist of nuts, avocado, coconut oil, butter, ketones.
So no carbs morning
Yep.
of.
I might do a banana, half a banana, maybe a piece of Ezekiel bread.
Right,
So
but this
I'll
is
get a
after
little bit
you've
of carbs.
loaded.
Yep.
3 or
Yep.
4 days prior, you upped your carbs.
Yep.
Okay, lower your fat a little bit, so they kind of offset. There was no surplus necessarily or deficit.
Right.
And then morning of, say that one more time so people catch that.
Okay. Nuts, avocado, coconut oil, butter, ketones. And I might throw in half a banana with a piece of Ezekiel bread.
Okay?
I want to be as high in calories when I start that race as I can, because pretty much after I start, I'm going to be in a caloric deficit all day long.
Got
And I
it.
think
And
what
then
we want to throw in with that real quickly too, just so that people are clear on that, is how many hours before the race begins are you getting that in?
2 hours. Yeah.
got it.
And then during race, ketones, some light carbs that are easy to
Like
get
the
down.
waffles.
Yep,
Like be specific, because these people will
Okay,
know.
Rip Van Waffle. It's easy to tear open a packet, shove it down, drink down some ketones with it, and keep on going.
Okay?
And then some energy chews, again, just a quick glycogen or glucose source, and there's something I'm missing.
Avocado, banana,
I don't
anything.
need any of that
Butter?
during the race. Sitting at the race before my wave starts for a swim, I'm watching all these people suck down goos, and I'm just thinking to myself, man, I feel sorry for them, because I'm chewing on my stick of butter and just knowing that I have an incredible fuel source.
Did you talk about scratch?
Scratch, that was the last thing. Yep. So, I think that's
Are
it.
we doing electrolytes?
That's scratch.
Scratch,
It's a
okay.
natural electrolyte. Yep.
Okay, fantastic. During the race, on average, I mean, is it 2 servings? In other words, 2 packets? Do you mix up a bottle? Is Wendy seeing you at mile marker or whatever, handing you a bottle?
I wish, but I'm not allowed to take anything from any bystanders. So I had ketone and butter right before my race started, and then once I get out of the water onto the bike, I've got 2 ketones stored in water bottles. I've got my scratch stored in another water bottle, and then just a regular water. I've got 2 waffles on the bike. I jump off the bike into the run. I've probably had some energy chews on the bike as well. And then into the run, I've got another ketone that I take in transition. 1 more waffle, 1 more chew, ketones, race, run.
So Kyle, you're sitting here watching this, continuing to coach. Like I heard you guys talking today. She was asking you questions, vice versa.
Right.
Has she seen her best yet?
Oh, no. When an endurance athlete or a triathlete begins, it usually takes them, 2, 3, 4 years really to get their system to open up and to really mature. So that's why you'll see younger runners or younger swimmers that come over into the sport of triathlon, multi-sport, and sometimes they need to get out of their own way a little bit. They're always on the rivet. They're always pushing hard. A lot of people think the best way to train is at race effort. And so, that was one of the things that we did with training with Becky, really going through the beginning of last year and then into race, was to learn the concept of a negative split mentality, which is quite simply start out at base, start out controllable effort, and then increase your effort as you go along. You really want to give your aerobic system a chance to get warmed up and fueled and burning. You want to mitigate that slow drip from your anaerobic substrates or from anaerobic pathways opening up and contributing too soon. So just to make that real simple, foundationally you want fat burning for as long as possible. It's called glycogen sparing. And so that's where training and diet kind of meet.
And that's your area of focus now. You know, you mentioned the gentleman that started with the cart.
Right. Yeah, Bob Seebahar
Yes.
is a guy that's been doing this for a long time and written a couple books. And his focus and his tag is metabolic efficiency. And so I think now, while that's a great foundational piece, I think we can add to that by going into metabolic optimization. I think metabolic efficiency is a piece of metabolic optimization, whereby you have a strong aerobic base, we're strong into the fat burn, but once we've gotten that fat burn working right, now we want to use that as a platform or a catapult to get us into our next level, our next energy system, which is glycogen. And then from there, we've got that third one, which is the phosphocreatine system, and that would be for burst training or power training. You know, you've got that 6 second to 10 second pop that you want to go. So, for example, if Becky's going along, she's on the bike, she's coming up on another cyclist, she can't draft, so she's got to pick her time, and then she's got to get out around them and go on by. So at that point, she wants to really have a good amount of anaerobic capacity or anaerobic fuel available.
And I think you say it best. I don't know. I've heard you say this. I don't remember how you say it. Where your body's writing checks that.
Yeah. So it's that your cardiovascular system is writing checks that your substrate utilization can't cash. So once fitness and training, whether it be pace on a run or watts on the bike, they can sustain an effort for a certain amount of time. Their heart and lungs, their cardiovascular fitness is adapted and really trained to their highest potential. But if their fueling isn't right, they're going to run out of gas too soon.
Got it. Perfect. Well said. Y'all, thank you so much. I think this is an awesome story. Can't wait to see. I know you're competing again in a week or so.
3 days,
Yeah.
Saturday morning.
Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, don't screw it up, and we
Try
want
not
you
to.
to.
I'll do you proud, man.
Awesome. Well, thank y'all so much.
Thank you very much.
And we'll post this on YouTube, and we'll make sure people know how to reach you and go from there.
Very good.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.